The evening had turned calm after dinner. The rain outside had softened into a slow drizzle, and the faint glow from the candles still warmed the room. Ethan sat on the couch, feeling a strange sense of peace that he hadn't felt in months. For the first time in a long while, the air didn't feel heavy between them. It was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that hurts. It was the kind that lets you breathe again. Claire watched him from across the room, her heart uncertain but hopeful. He looked tired, yes, but also softer somehow, as if something inside him had loosened. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should give him the gift she had hidden away. It wasn't expensive or flashy. It wasn't something money could buy. It was something made from the kind of love that had endured even when everything else seemed to fall apart. Finally, she stood and disappeared into the bedroom. Ethan glanced up, puzzled, hearing the faint sound of a drawer opening. When she returned, she was holding a small square box wrapped in simple brown paper, tied with a piece of string. No ribbons, no card, just quiet simplicity. "What's this?" he asked, half smiling. "Your gift," she said softly. "You didn't have to get me anything," he replied, his voice gentle but tired. "I know," she said, meeting his eyes. "But I wanted to—" She placed the box in his hands and sat beside him, her fingers nervously twisting together. Ethan turned the box over once, then carefully began to unwrap it. The sound of paper tearing seemed louder in the silence. Inside, he found a small wooden frame. He frowned at first, curious, then slowly lifted it out. The frame held a collage photographs of them from different years. Their first Christmas together. A road trip through Vermont where they'd gotten lost and laughed for hours. A blurry photo of him cooking breakfast in their first apartment. Every picture told a story, small, real, filled with moments that once defined their love. At the center of it all was a photo he hadn't seen in years. It was taken by a stranger at a lakeside just before sunset. Claire was wearing a white sweater, her hair messy from the wind, and he was behind her, holding her close, both of them smiling like the world was theirs. It was the day he'd told her he wanted to spend forever with her. His eyes lingered on that picture until he noticed the handwritten line beneath it, a few simple words that hit harder than he expected. "In case you've forgotten what we look like when we're happy." The room went silent. Ethan didn't know what to say. His chest felt tight, as if those words had reached somewhere deep inside that he'd been ignoring for too long. "Claire," he started, but his voice trailed off. She didn't look away. "You used to smile like that every day," she said softly. "We both did." He placed the frame on the table carefully, like it was something fragile. "Why would you say that?" "Because," she said, her voice trembling just slightly, "I think we've forgotten who we were. We've been living like roommates, not partners. And I miss us the way we used to laugh, the way we used to care without needing a reason." He ran a hand through his hair, guilt washing over him. He hadn't realized how far they had drifted until now. Every late night at the office, every broken promise, every "I'll make it up to you," they had all added up to this silence. "I didn't mean for things to turn out like this," he said quietly. "I thought I was doing everything for our future." "I know," she replied, her tone gentle. "But sometimes in building the future, we forget to live in the present. You stopped looking at me the way you used to, Ethan. I stopped feeling seen." Her words weren't angry, they were honest, and that made them even heavier. He looked down at the frame again, tracing his fingers over the photo. "You kept all these pictures." "Every one," she said with a small, wistful smile. "They remind me that we've been happy before. And if we were happy once, maybe we can be again." Something inside him shifted at that. He had walked through the door tonight expecting another quiet birthday. Maybe a small dinner, maybe the same distance that had filled their lives for months. But instead she had given him something deeper. Not just a reminder of love, but a quiet invitation to find it again. He looked up at her, seeing her in a way he hadn't in so long. The soft sadness in her eyes, the strength in her voice, the quiet hope behind her words. She wasn't giving up. She was reaching out. "You've always been the heart of us, Claire," he said, his voice low. "I think I just forgot how much that mattered." Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. Then maybe this can help you remember. Ethan took her hand gently, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel like a routine gesture. It felt real. The warmth of her hand reminded him of the way she used to squeeze his fingers during movies or when they crossed the street together. Little things that once meant everything. The rain outside grew a little louder, as if echoing the moment. He stared at the frame again and whispered, "You always know how to say the things I don't." Claire gave a small laugh. "It's the only way I know how to love you." He looked at her, feeling something in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude. Not just for the gift, but for her patience, for staying when she had every reason to leave. The room felt different now. Not fixed, not perfect, but alive. Something had opened between them. Something small, fragile, but full of possibility. "Thank you," he said finally, the words sincere. "For reminding me." Claire nodded, her smile tender but tinged with sadness. "I just want us to find our way back." Ethan leaned back, staring at the collage once more. Every photo was a chapter of their story, moments of laughter, of adventure, of love that once felt unstoppable. Maybe that love wasn't gone. Maybe it was just buried under years of routine and exhaustion, waiting to be uncovered. He looked at her again, his voice soft but firm. "I don't want this to be just a memory, Claire. I want to make new ones." Her eyes glistened. "Then let's start by remembering what it felt like to mean everything to each other." They sat there quietly, side by side, as the rain whispered against the glass. No grand gestures, no dramatic speeches, just two people realizing that love doesn't vanish overnight. It waits, it lingers, it hopes someone will choose it again. Ethan reached out, pulling her hand closer. "This gift," he said slowly, "it's the best one I've ever gotten." She looked at him, surprised. "Even better than that watch I got you last year." He smiled faintly. "Way better." And as they sat there, the candles flickering low, both of them knew something had changed. The distance between them wasn't gone, not yet. But for the first time in a long while, it felt crossable. It wasn't the gift itself that mattered. It was what it meant that she still believed in them, that she was still willing to try, and that maybe was the only thing he'd truly needed to remember. The candles had burned low, and the rain had quieted into a gentle rhythm outside the window. Ethan sat with the photo frame resting on his lap, staring at the smiling faces frozen in time. Each image seemed to whisper memories he had tried to outrun, laughter in crowded streets, whispered promises under starlight, and quiet mornings filled with warmth instead of silence. Claire sat beside him, her hands folded tightly, afraid to break whatever fragile peace had finally settled between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. But beneath that quiet, emotions churned, guilt, longing, love, and something that felt like regret slowly turning into courage. Ethan took a slow breath and finally said, "I didn't realize how far apart we'd grown." His voice was low, almost unsure. "I thought I was doing everything for us, working harder, earning more, trying to give you everything you deserve." Claire turned to him, her eyes tired but calm. "I never needed more, Ethan. I just needed you. I wanted you to come home and still see me, not just the routine, not just the bills or the plans." She gave a small, almost broken laugh. "You used to ask about my day. You used to care about the little things." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He remembered those moments vividly, when she'd tell him stories about her students, or when she'd sit on the balcony with tea, waiting for him to join her. He had stopped noticing those details. He had stopped noticing her. He rubbed his face, his chest tight. "You're right. Somewhere along the way, I just started existing instead of living. And the worst part is, I thought we were fine." Claire shook her head softly. "We stopped fighting, Ethan. That's when I knew we weren't fine. People who still care, they fight. They talk, they try. But we just stopped." The truth in her words made his heart ache. The distance between them hadn't come from one big argument. It had grown quietly, in the spaces they stopped filling with effort. He reached out and took her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it carried years of apologies that words couldn't express. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for making you feel alone even when I was right here." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I know you didn't mean to. I think we just forgot that love isn't something we have once. It's something we have to keep choosing." They sat there, holding hands, the sound of the rain filling the pauses between their words. It wasn't the kind of dramatic moment you see in movies. It was quieter, more real. To people realizing that love doesn't die from storms. It fades from neglect. Ethan let out a shaky breath. "You know, when I looked at that picture of us at the lake, I could almost feel what it was like that day. I remember how the air smelled, how you laughed when I tried to skip stones and failed." He smiled faintly. "That was the day I knew I loved you." Claire looked at him, her expression softening. "And that was the day I realized you'd always make me feel safe." They both laughed quietly, a sound that felt like an exhale after holding their breath for too long. "I don't know how to fix everything," he admitted, "but I want to try. I don't want our love to just be a memory in a frame." She looked down at their hands. "Trying means showing up, Ethan. It means choosing to stay even when it's hard, to talk even when it's uncomfortable." "I can do that," he said, his tone steady now. "I want to do that." For the first time in months, she believed him, not because of his words, but because of the way he said them, like a man finally understanding what he had almost lost. She took a deep breath. "I kept thinking we needed something big to change us. But maybe we just need to start with small things. Dinner together, no phones, no distractions. Maybe even a walk in the morning before work. The little things matter more than we think." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we start small." The weight in the room began to lift. The pain was still there. Now it shared space with something else. Hope. He picked up the frame again, tracing his finger over the photo. "You know, I used to look at this picture and think we were perfect. But maybe we weren't perfect. Maybe we were just real, and that's better." Claire smiled faintly. "Perfect couples don't last. Real ones do." For a long while, they sat there in quiet understanding. The clock ticked past 10. The candles dimmed to a soft amber glow, and outside the rain slowed to a mist. It felt like the world was giving them a moment to breathe again. Then Ethan spoke, his voice thoughtful. "Do you think it's too late for us to find that again?" She shook her head. "No, but it won't come by looking back. We have to start looking forward." He looked at her, really looked at the woman who had stayed even when things had grown difficult, who had kept believing in love when he had let it drift. He saw her strength, her quiet heart. And he felt something inside him shift, a promise forming silently in his chest. "I want to start over," he said finally. "Not with a grand gesture, just with honesty." Claire smiled through her tears. "Then start now." He nodded and squeezed her hand. "Okay, I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do." Her eyes glistened. "I know. I just needed to hear it." The simplicity of that exchange felt like a healing moment. No shouting, no drama, just truth. Ethan leaned back, letting the quiet fill the space again. For once, silence wasn't an enemy. It was a bridge, a soft reminder that not everything broken stays broken. The night grew colder, and Claire pulled a blanket over them. He glanced at her and smiled faintly. "You still do that? You still take care of me even when you're mad at me?" "I never stopped caring," she said, "even when I was hurt." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's our answer. Love isn't about always being happy. It's about showing up even when it hurts." Claire rested her head on his shoulder. "Exactly." The warmth between them felt different now. Not the wild rush of new love, but the quiet strength of something rediscovered. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough for tonight. Ethan glanced at the clock and smiled softly. "You know, this might be the best birthday I've ever had." Claire lifted her head and gave him a teasing look. "Even better than the one where I burned your cake." He laughed quietly. especially that one. The laughter faded into a peaceful quiet. Outside, the rain stopped completely, leaving the world calm and still. Inside, the space between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like possibility. As they sat together, Claire whispered, "Maybe this is the reminder we both needed." Ethan turned to her, his voice low. "Maybe it is." He looked back at the frame on the table, the photo glowing faintly under the last flicker of candlelight. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel trapped in the past. He felt ready for whatever came next. And deep down, he knew this conversation, these quiet, unspoken truths might be the real gifts she had given him all along. The night had settled into stillness, broken only by the faint hum of the city beyond the rain-washed windows. Ethan sat alone on the couch long after Claire had gone to bed. The candles had burned down 2 pools of wax. Now the air carried the soft scent of vanilla and something bittersweet, the feeling of endings and beginnings woven together. The collage sat on the coffee table in front of him, its photographs glowing softly in the dim light. Each picture felt alive, whispering the kind of love that once filled every corner of their lives. He picked up the frame again, turning it in his hands carefully. There was something different about it now, not just the pictures or the words she had written beneath them, but the message behind it all. It wasn't just a gift. It was a story, a quiet confession wrapped in memories. It was her way of saying, "I still believe in us." As he stared at it, he noticed a faint fold at the back of the frame. Curious, he flipped it over and saw a small envelope tucked behind the cardboard backing. He pulled it out carefully, his heart suddenly uneasy. Inside was a single piece of paper, a handwritten note in her delicate script, the kind of writing she used when words mattered most. He unfolded it and began to read. "If we ever forget how to love each other, let's start by remembering who we were before the world got in the way." He paused, feeling his throat tighten. The words were simple, yet they carried more weight than any apology or promise could. As he read on, he saw another line written in a softer ink as if she'd added it at the last moment. "And if you still want to try, I'll be waiting at the lake tomorrow at sunset." He exhaled slowly, the room suddenly feeling both heavy and hopeful. The lake. Their lake. The one in the photo at the center of the collage. The place where he had first told her he loved her. Where they'd made plans for a future that now seemed distant but not lost. He looked toward the bedroom door, where Claire was sleeping. For the first time in months, his heart felt alive. She wasn't just giving him a memory. She was offering him a chance to choose her again. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words from her note echoing in his mind. Every sound in the apartment, the soft tick of the clock, the faint rustle of the rain gutter outside, reminded him of how fragile time was. How easily love could slip away if left unattended. He realized she had done something extraordinary. She had forgiven him without saying the words. And instead, she had invited him to remember why they had ever begun. When morning came, the city was washed clean by rain. Claire moved quietly in the kitchen, her hair pulled into a loose bun, the smell of coffee filling the air. Ethan watched her from the doorway, wanting to tell her he'd found the note, but he didn't. Not yet. He wanted to hold on to the feeling, the anticipation, the hope, the decision already forming in his heart. She looked up and smiled faintly. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he replied softly, his eyes lingering on her longer than usual. They spoke little as the day went on. Claire assumed he'd go to work as usual, and she didn't ask about his plans. Part of her wondered if he'd found the note, and part of her was afraid to hope. She had written it late last night, her heart uncertain but full of quiet courage. It wasn't a demand or a test, it was simply an open door. As the day stretched on, clouds broke, letting sunlight spill across the streets. Ethan couldn't focus on anything else. Every part of him kept drifting back to the lake, to the memory of her laughter there, to the way her hand had fit perfectly in his. He knew now that this wasn't just about fixing the past. It was about choosing their love all over again with the same conviction they'd once had. But with deeper understanding this time, by late afternoon, he made his decision. He left his phone behind, got in his car, and drove out of the city. The road curved through familiar countryside, and each mile brought back memories, the songs they used to play, the arguments that ended in laughter. The dreams they'd shared before life grew complicated. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't running away from his thoughts. He was running toward something. When he arrived at the lake, the sky was painted with streaks of gold and pink. The water was calm, reflecting the sunset like a mirror. He stepped out, feeling the cool breeze brush against his skin, carrying the scent of pine and earth. And there she was, standing near the water's edge, her arms wrapped around herself, her hair moving gently with the wind. She turned when she heard his footsteps. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. They just looked at each other, the silence between them holding everything words couldn't. "You came," she said softly, her voice barely above the sound of the rippling water. "I told you I would," he replied. There was a pause. Then she smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both relief and fear. "I didn't know if you'd find the note." "I did," he said, stepping closer. "And I've been thinking about it all day. About what it means. About what we mean." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening in the fading light. "I wasn't sure you still wanted this." He stopped in front of her, close enough to see the reflection of the sunset in her eyes. "I do," he said simply. "I never stopped wanting it. I just forgot how to show it." For a long time, they stood there, the world quiet around them. The lake shimmered, the trees whispered, and time seemed to pause, giving them space to begin again. "I don't expect everything to change overnight," Claire said softly. "I just want to try. To remember how to be us again." Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Then let's start right here." The sun dipped lower, turning the water to gold. He looked at her and saw not the woman he had drifted from, but the woman he had always loved, the one who never gave up, who believed in second chances even when everything felt lost in that moment. He realized that love wasn't something to be found again. It was something to be rebuilt, one honest moment at a time. They stood together until the last light of day faded. The quiet between them was no longer heavy. It was filled with the promise of trying again, not perfectly, but truthfully. When they finally walked back to the car, Claire glanced at him and said softly, "So, was my gift enough?" Ethan smiled, his voice warm. "You didn't just give me a gift, Claire. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost us." "Shh," she smiled, her eyes shining in the twilight. Then maybe it was the right gift after all. As they drove home beneath a sky scattered with stars, neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer the sound of distance. It was the sound of peace. That night, Ethan placed the collage back on the wall right above their living room couch. He looked at it one last time before turning off the lights. The picture in the center, the one at the lake, now held a new meaning. It wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a beginning, and for the first time in a long while, he went to bed with a heart that felt whole. Not because everything was perfect, but because he finally understood what she had been trying to show him all along. Sometimes, the most powerful gifts are the ones that remind you how to love again.